So yeah, I'm Steve. I'm the hot dog today. On Twitter, I'm at @ppopowitz. Email if you want to reach out to me, steven.j.hicks@gmail.com. And the slides, there are not very many of them, but the ones that there are at the URL down there, stevenhicks.me, thank you, /simplifying-content-management. So we're going to talk about Eleventy.js and Netlify CMS. And I want to start by talking about a history of the web. And the best way to learn from history is to visit it. So we're all going to get in a time-traveling DeLorean right now. Everybody climb in. There's room for all of you. We're going to set the time circuits back to about 20 years ago, 1998. Ska bands were on the radio. I have bad news, unfortunately. The DeLorean is kind of a piece of crap, and it works. It just doesn't always work. What I've found is that it works best when I get everyone to just like make spark sounds as we hit 88 miles an hour, and that'll like propel us back. But honestly, it's not going to work if you don't do it with me. So let's do that right now. We'll hit 86, 87, 88 miles an hour. And we come out, and we are in the before time. Let's go find the internet here in the before time. I think it's over this way, because I definitely remember we have to walk past Hot Topic to get there. And you might hear something not to. Whoa, watch out! It's a real big fish. Here it is. Here's the internet from 1998. It is hosted on GeoCities. It's got blink tags and it's got marquee tags. And it's got a ton of static HTML files, which end up looking like this. It's kind of hard to maintain all those files. So, since we're developers, we decided that we would write dynamic backends to manage these files for us. And we started with some goodies like PHP and classic ASP. And these were good, but we could do better. We built ASP.NET, and we built Rails, and we put JavaScript on a server, which is madness. But it made our lives easier, because now we didn't have to worry about managing all of those files. We could use templates to kind of construct them out of data from a database. We could do better still. Instead of having to copy and paste things all over the place, we could build CMSes like WordPress and Embraco. These had GUIs for editing the content, which was awesome because now we could tell our friends in marketing who wear the shirts that clearly identify them as working in marketing that, hey, you can go manage the site now. I don't need to do any of it. You're in charge of the content, not me. And this was awesome because it meant that we could go back to our desk and focus on the things that we wanted to focus on. Like, let me see if I can get that to start. Can't get it to start. Like putting your computer in airplane mode and playing Dino Dash. So that's the past. Let's get back to the present. And again, I need you to all make those noises with me. So we're at 85 miles an hour, 86, 87, 88 miles an hour. And we come out, and we're back in 2018. And we're going to look at the internet in 2018. God, it's real big fish again! Ugh. If you just ignore them, they will go away. I promise. They won't. They probably won't. There's a 15th revival of ska coming soon, I'm sure. But here it is. We found the internet. It looks like this. It looks like the Bootstrap website. It's built with Bootstrap. If you're fancy, you change a couple of colors, because no one wants to look exactly like Bootstrap. Behind the scenes, a lot of it looks like this, and this is the WordPress admin. It underwent a facelift fairly recently. Doesn't look like it used to. If you've ever hosted a WordPress site yourself, you know that some days it feels like this when you're on WordPress. Statistically speaking, it's more likely for you to be mauled by a bear than for you to properly secure WordPress. It's hard to do. So how did we get to here? How did we get to this place where every site we build is built with a dynamic backend, whether it needs it or not? It's pretty obvious. Fabio came along on horseback. He represents the dynamic backend CMS. His long hair is flowing in the wind, and he has a shirt on, kind of. I wouldn't call it a shirt. I wouldn't wear it, but he has a shirt. And he says quietly in our ear, "I'm so easy to set up." And he whispers, "Anyone can use my admin." And then he harkens back to the good old days of our blink tags and our marquee tags and our GeoCities, and he tries to remind us, remember how hard it was to manage all those static files? It's not worth it. Eventually, we've heard all his stories before, and we just we give in. We go on autopilot. Today, a hero rises. And this hero's name is Supercat, and Supercat is wearing a cape that is actually the mat that you put underneath a child's seat and gets covered with crusty Cheerios, and it is in fact covered with crusty Cheerios. Supercat has some questions for us. She wants to know if we're using the right tool for this, to build our websites. She wants to know if our content is really dynamic. If every user sees the same thing, is that dynamic content or is that really static content? And if the content doesn't change that frequently, do we really need to even drive it dynamically in the first place? And one other question that she asked us is one that we don't usually think about until we've spent the last 4 days trying to figure out why our WordPress site keeps crashing. Is it really worth the cost of support for this? And Supercat shows us some surprising numbers. 32% of websites on the internet right now run on WordPress. If you have really good eyes right now, you can see that the link says WordPress runs 25%. The first time I looked this stat up a year and a half ago, it was 25%. Now it's 32%. It's increasing at a crazy rate. 70% of WordPress installs are vulnerable to things like cross-site scripting and cross-site request forgery, SQL injection. That's a little scary, but this smaller number is even scarier to me. 20% of the top WordPress plugins are vulnerable to those same types of attacks. The 70% I'm fine with because, well, that just means that the WordPress team is going to go fix this, they're going to patch it, and I'm going to need to go update my instance and it'll be fine. But the plugins I'm more worried about because those are written by who knows who. They don't know if it's a problem. They don't know how, I don't know if they know how to fix it. I don't know when they'll fix it. I might just be stuck with this awful plugin on my website. So our hero looks back to us and she says there's a better way. And that's what I want to talk about today. Is how can we simplify this process of putting together a website that has a user managing content, a user viewing the content, and doesn't need a ton of stuff going on in between. Traditional CMS functions like this big container ship. It's got tons of containers on that boat. They all do things that are important. Each one of them matters. And somebody needs every single one of those containers that are on that ship. But the average website that you create doesn't need all 500 of those containers. It needs maybe 10 of those containers. But it's stuck with them because that's what you get with the whole thing. So using a microservice approach, we can kind of rethink how we're building websites with a CMS. Maybe instead of having a big ship with a bunch of containers on it, we can have a bunch of tiny little boats. Each one of those boats doing something specialized. And then when we only need 10 of those 500 containers, we just pull out those 10 little boats. And we're going to do this with a whole lot of demos today. The first tool we're going to be using is called Eleventy. And you can find Eleventy at 11ty.io. That's Eleventy. This is a static site generator. And what it does, it basically eats markdown files and poops HTML. So we'll feed it all the markdown files we want for all the content on our site. And it's going to generate, when we ask it to, all of the HTML for a site that then we can dump all that HTML on a server somewhere and have a website. We don't need a backend for every request for this site. That's not every site in the world, but for the ones that we're going to be talking about here, it's pretty simple. We don't need to set up a database. It's just content that's going to get updated maybe once a week. It's kind of like a return to the 90s era web, except the tooling is much better than it was back then. So those big boxes of folders that were unwieldy are going to be nice and neat and organized for us. And you're going to see that this is a pretty developer-friendly way to build a website, but it's not really friendly to the content authors because they're not going to go write code in a text editor. And so that's where we're going to pull in a tool called Netlify CMS. It falls under the umbrella of what's called headless CMSes, which are basically a CMS as a service. There's a lot of them that are API driven, where they'll store all of your content for you. Netlify CMS is a little bit different. What's going to happen with Netlify CMS is we have on the very bottom, we have our markdown files being pumped into Eleventy, and then we're dumping out the HTML. Inside of our HTML, we're going to put a special little JavaScript include that is going to basically spawn up this CMS admin at the top. So we've got the Netlify CMS at the top. We're going to have our content author who's going to go into that CMS using authentication from Netlify itself, or through Google, or through whoever we want, any of the providers that you might expect to be there. Our author is going to go into that form, and she or he's going to enter some content, going to hit save, and then what's going to happen is, instead of that data being updated in a database anywhere, it's just going to submit it's going to commit a markdown file, a new markdown file, into your repository that contains markdown files, and push it to your GitHub site, or wherever it is that you're hosting the source. And then Eleventy is going to run again, now that it has a new markdown file. And we'll see how all this fits together. So now we've got two happy campers. We have a happy dev because we get to write the code in a text editor, and we don't have to learn all these crazy principles and patterns and ideas from a CMS that does a lot of things that we don't need to do. And we've got a happy author because she has a nice UI to go in and edit the fields and do the things that she wants to do. But there's still one more person that's missing from the story, and that is the user. We want to make sure that the users who come to this site are really happy. And this is where we're going to be pulling in Netlify, which happens to be the company that wrote Netlify CMS, you might have guessed. Netlify is a relatively new hosting company. They're really focused on hosting static sites, which is perfect for us because that's what we're going to be doing. If there's one thing I can recommend to everyone in this room as a takeaway from tonight, it is go use Netlify for everything that you can use it for, because it's super delightful. It's fast, it's intuitive. Everything I try to do in Netlify just works. So now we've got three happy campers. We have the devs who are happy because they're writing in VS Code. We have the author who's happy because they're not writing in VS Code. And then we have the user who's happy because the site flies, because it's all just static pages that are pushed out to a CDN by Netlify. And this is where we're going to shift to the entire second act, which is we're going to actually go build some sites. So, I'm going to get myself settled here. Let me go ahead and stop mirroring. All right. Should be able to see that. It's good. I'm going to pull up some VS Code stuff, and I'll bump up the font size. How is that font size in the back of the room? Is that acceptable? A little bit higher?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. I don't know that I'm going to be able to do much less than this. So let's try this and see how it goes. All right, so I have some things that I've set up already for us. What I've done is I have created a directory here. 11D Netlify CMS is where I've put it. And I have, I've basically done an npm init. So if you're not familiar with npm init, what that's going to do is basically configure this project so that we can pull in dependencies from npm, the node package manager. The side effect of that is we get this package.json file, which just describes our project. We give it a description, some other information. Not much else in there. Another thing that I've done already is to initialize it as a Git repository. So I ran git init, and so you can see I have a git ignore file here that I've added, basically because there's a couple things that I don't want included in my Git repository. Those things are the node modules folder, because no one ever wants that included in a repository. And then I also added this _site/ folder. And you'll see in a little bit why I'm not including this one. Another thing that I've done is I've just downloaded some images for us of spooky kitties. So that one's probably pretty spooky. That one's not as spooky. They get spookier as we go. But now I have some images for us to put on a website, and I'd like to build a website about spooky kitties. And I think that's what we're going to do. I've also pushed out I've set up a remote in Git, and I've pushed out the repository to GitHub. So 11D, Pipowitz 11D-Netlify-CMS has a repository here. Right now I'm looking at the fresh start branch. Don't worry about that. Because the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to go in here and we are going to, oops, not sure what happened there. We are going to, we're going to create a new branch. Let's do git checkout -b, then let's call it MKEJS. Okay, so we created a new branch, MKEJS, and I'm just going to kind of push out our changes as we go, as we iterate through this, so that we can see them in the repository out on GitHub. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to install, and I'm going to save it to my dev dependencies, npm install save dev at LLTY-11D, I believe that's what it's called. I have it written down. Yep, 11D/11D. Here's where I was going to get out the phone to tell some jokes, because we got to wait for npm. Let me see. What do you do when 50 zombies surround your house? Hope it's Halloween. Let's see. Why didn't the skeleton cross the road? Because he didn't have any guts. We're all set here. Okay. All right, so I've installed my 11D as a local dependency. You can also install it as a global dependency if you know what that means. My preference is to install it locally so that I can be aware of what the version is and keep that in my package.json. Speaking of, we see now that I have a dev dependency added to my package.json. The other thing I'm going to do here real quick is I'm going to add one more script. I've added a whole bunch of snippets to make this easier for myself. I added a script to start the app. And what that script is going to do is it's going to call 11D passing the serve flag. How's the font size in the back right now?
Good.
Happy?
Good.
Okay, cool. So I've added this. And then the other thing we need to do is, well, we got to have a page. We want an index page for our website. And so we're going to create, instead of creating index.html, we're going to create index.md, which means that we're going to write it in Markdown, which you might not like, or you might not be familiar with. If you're unfamiliar with it, it's basically just secret codes to generate HTML. So if I use a hash, that means that I want a heading. And I'm going to just kind of paste some stuff in here so that we don't waste time typing. So I do 1 hash, it means it's an H1, heading 1. 2 hashes is an H2. Up to 6 hashes would be an H6. Anything surrounded by space is basically a paragraph. And then the asterisks are used to make an unordered list. So yeah, so spooky kitties, they'll melt your heart and eat your brains, and some other things that they will eat. This is going to be our index page. So I saved that. Then, let's see. So the next thing I want to do is I want to fire up my local server. And since I added my start script, I'm going to do npm start. And let's take a look at this output real quick down here. When I do npm start, you can see I'm running Eleventy with the serve flag. It tells me that it's writing site index.html from index.md. And then it gives me some URLs. Let's go take a look at that first URL. And here's the website that we just created. What we wrote as Markdown is now HTML. If I view the page source on this guy, we can see that's what we wrote in Markdown. Probably don't need to, let's go a little bit bigger. Okay, so that's cool. We can get a little hint of that from the output that we had here. Writing site index.html from /index.md. What Eleventy is doing is it's looking through our folder, looking for any Markdown files that we have, or HTML files. And then it basically turns those into a corresponding HTML file inside of this site folder. So I can see, here's my outputted site, I can see the HTML that was generated and is actually served up. Eleventy, because I handed it the serve flag, generates the site folder, then it goes ahead and runs a local web server against that site folder. Pretty simple stuff. So at this point, we've got a site up and running, so I want to go ahead and I'm just going to commit this work just to keep track. So we'll do git add everything, git commit, setup, and then we'll push it to the origin. And we have to basically set it to track it. So that should do that. Error messages that tell you exactly what to type are really helpful. Okay, so we just pushed out some changes. If I go back out here to my repo, let's just make sure that we got stuff out there. I'm in a new branch now called mke.js, so I'll switch to that. Cool, it's out there. And it's got our index.md. Great. All right, so it's not really a useful Spooky Kitties website if it doesn't have images. So let's go ahead and add some images. Like I mentioned earlier, I pulled down some images in this folder. Let's just say we want to add one. And we're gonna add some alt text of Spooky Kitty. And we'll have the path be images, kitty, whoa, bumped something. Like that. Now I'm going to go ahead and save this file. And let's, what we'll see is that my index.html actually updated already. Eleventy updated it because it was watching. And it stuck in this image with the source tag and the alt tag, which is great. That's exactly what I wanted to happen. Let's go check it out on the browser. And my image doesn't work. Well, my image doesn't work because all that Eleventy is looking for right now is Markdown files and HTML files and some templating files, not images. So we need to go tell Eleventy that, well, even though this isn't a template, I basically want you to copy these things directly to the site folder when you build. So we will do that by adding a file in the root that is basically our Eleventy config file, and it's named .eleventy.js. And I'm going to go ahead and the CMS one. I'm going to dump out a function here. Here's the code that we're going to write in our Eleventy config file. It's going to export a single function, and it's going to get this Eleventy config passed into the function, which we will call add pass-through copy against, and we'll tell it the folder that we want to copy through. So what we're really saying is just copy whatever's in the images folder through to the site directory. And then we have to return this object basically to enable pass-through file copy. Once we've done that, I'm going to go ahead and save it, and you'll see really quickly in my site output folder, I got the images copied over. So that's good news. I should be able to go back here to my browser and see that I do indeed have a really large spooky kitty on my website. So we'll leave that right there. All right, so this is a good place to commit some work. Git add everything, git, bumped something. I don't know if anyone has one of these newer, stop. Disconnect. Does anyone know how to disconnect this? Offhand? I launched the debugger. Stop. Maybe. It might not be a big deal. Let's go back to our terminal and see what we've got going on there. Looks like it's not affecting us really, so let's just pretend it never happened. The trackpads on these new MacBook Pros are gigantic, and I just bump things all the time because of it, I assume. Maybe it's the keyboard. I don't know. Okay, so what we wanted to do was basically, that was a good point for us to go ahead and commit our work. So we added everything, and then we're going to commit everything, images, and then we're going to push it back out to the origin. Great, that is helpful. But one thing that would be more helpful is some more content than what we have. So I want to add some more pages. Right now I have an index, and that turns into my index.html. I'm going to add an about page. Seems like a useful thing to have on a website. And let's just say this is going to be due to 0. We'll say about spooky kitties. They're spooky, they want to eat your brains, and they also want to cuddle. That sounds like them. And then I'm going to also add, I don't have it yet, but I eventually want to add a blog section. So I'm going to add a blog folder, and then I'm going to put in there, just for now, a blog index page. And for right now, we'll just have that spit out a title, Spooky Bloggy Kitties, and we're going to get back to making it actually show blog posts there. One other page I want to add is a 404 page. So we'll do 404.md, markdown file, and I'm going to go ahead and dump out this one. This is just going to be spooky kitties, can't find what you're looking for, kitty shrug, kitty shrug, kitty shrug. Now, I saved all those files, and what we'll notice if we look inside of our site, our outputted site, is that they've already been generated by Eleventy, almost immediately, which is great. So now I have a blog index.html. I have an about folder. Even though I added an about.md, Eleventy turns it into an about folder with an index.html. And the reason for that, if I go back to my website, is so that I can use some nice friendly URLs like, this is going to be hard for you to read in the back, but it's just now /about. And when I go to /about, I get my about page, instead of having to type about.html or something like that. So that's just kind of a convention that a lot of static generators use to allow you to use more friendly URLs, but put the markdown files where you want to put them. So let's go ahead and let's push this site live. This seems like another good breaking point. Let's just go make sure the other pages work right away too. We have an about, we have a blog, there's stuff that's going to go there. Let's check out our 404 page. 404 page, can't find what you're looking for. Great. We'll add it, commit it, more content, and then we'll push it out to the origin. And now we want to push it live, and this is where we're going to use Netlify. So I've pulled up the Netlify website right here. Zoom in a little bit for you there. It's their homepage. It's really interesting. If you get a chance, just go browse their features, because they do a lot of crazy cool stuff with continuous deployment for your static sites. And HTTPS is automatic. You basically just check a box and you've got free SSL on your site. You can preview things by branch. I'm going to stop talking right there because we could lose a lot of time being amazed by Netlify. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in. And I've logged in already, so it knows that I want to log in with GitHub. When you come here, you would log in however you want. And I've got all my sites listed here. Zoom in a little bit. We're going to build a new one. We're going to add a new one. So we're going to say new site from Git, and we're going to connect to a Git provider. I'm going to choose GitHub, because that's where my repository is. And it's going to authorize me through GitHub's site. And when you do this the first time, you won't see your repository named here, because you'll have to actually tell GitHub which repositories you want to authorize. I've already done that for this repository, so I see it here. And in fact, I'm going to select it here. I picked my repository, and I'm going to choose the branch that I want to deploy. We said MKE.js, so I'm picking MKE.js. Basic build settings, it can detect that I want to use Eleventy. It's smart enough to know that. I'm not gonna. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an npm command, or an npm script that I'll call build, and that's just because I like to keep my scripts inside of my package JSON. We could just do it with Eleventy too if we wanted to. But we do want to publish from the site directory. Before I hit that deploy site button, I'm going to go back and I'm going to add that build script. So let's go ahead and jump into our package JSON, and I've got the start script for my build script. I am literally just going to type Eleventy. Cancel, great. But if you have things that you want to do besides just build Eleventy, here's how you do it. You would just build that command, or build all those things into this command. So it would take care of any assets that you needed to minify or anything like that. Any Sass that you wanted to turn into CSS, you could do that here also. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to real quick add git commit my build command, and then push it back to my origin. And that shouldn't take very long. And now I'm going to actually just hit this deploy site button, and we're going to take a look at the friendly name that Netlify generated for us, Pensive Northcut. It's nice. It'll generate a name for every site you create, but we can also go and we can change it, which is something that I think we should do right now. Because if we're building a website about spooky kitties, we should make it clear that it's about spooky kitties. So I'm going to change my subdomain to spooky kitties and go ahead and save it. Cool. That's helpful. There's a whole bunch of other things that we can change in here in these settings about our site. We're not going to look at very many of them. We'll touch on one more a little bit later. But for right now, let's go ahead and take a look at our overview and find that here's our production deploys. We find that the commit that we just made was published. So it did not take long at all. Less than a minute, I'd say, for that thing to publish. We can go look at the build log if we want. And you'll see whole bunches of JavaScript things like installing versions of Node and NPM and installing dependencies. And then here's where it actually calls Eleventy and does this stuff. And then it actually goes and deploys it, which is great. 33 seconds is what it took for us to deploy our website. Cool.
What's executing the deploy?
Netlify is doing the deploy for us. I don't know what it's using under the covers. I don't know if it's doing some Docker stuff underneath the covers or anything like that. But as far as I'm concerned, basically I am telling it to run the Eleventy command through NPM. And then whatever ends up in that site folder, it just copies that over to the server that gets pushed live.
Did you do anything custom to the Eleventy command?
I did nothing custom so far. Absolutely nothing. So we can actually now, let's go look at this website. Friendly URL right there, spookykitties.netlify.com. We've got a website out there on the internet at, zoom in so you can see the content, spookykitties.netlify.com. And if you're interested, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 O's in spooky. Cool. So we just pushed the site live. Pretty simple. We can go ahead and we can look for all our different pages that we added. We had an about page. Here's my about spooky kitties. We added a blog page. And there's my blog page. We added, what else did we add? We added a 404. There's my 404 page. What would be cool is if the 404 would serve if we entered any garbage into the URL, like somebody tried to go to a page that didn't exist. Unfortunately, what we see right now is that the page is not found through Netlify. This is a pretty simple thing to fix. There's a reason that it's not serving up the 404.html file. And that reason is that the 404.html file doesn't exist. Because remember, Eleventy, as a convention, will take that 404.md that we had in the source right here, and it'll turn it into 404/index.html. But we can easily fix that by using what is called front matter in our markdown file. Front matter basically means metadata about the content that you're writing. And you specify front matter with 3 dashes, separate that. That basically fences it off from the actual content, and then it's just key value pairs from there. So in this case, what I want, one of the settings that I know I have access to from Netlify is the permalink. So I want to specify here that the permalink for this page is 404.html. And then I'm going to go ahead and save this. And because I have Eleventy watching my file system, you'll see it didn't clean up the old one. The old one is still out there, at least locally. But it did create the new one at 404.html, which is exactly what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to push that out. Add it, commit it, 404, and then I'm going to push it to the origin.
The changes you just made, or is that all in the markup?
So the change that I made was in the markdown file, and I added a permalink property to this markdown file. Locally, I saw it generate in the site folder, but that's because Eleventy was watching for the change, and it saw that it wanted a different permalink than what it was giving it, and so now it generated it with the 404.html.
That permalink is not.
Yep, and that's the hyphen, hyphen, hyphen. That basically allows you to specify metadata about your content.
That is 11.
Oh, it's called YAML, is the language that I'm using. Yet another markup language. The Eleventy supports you adding those things to the top of a markdown file. Not everything supports you adding that to a markdown file. So yes, Eleventy has that added as a feature, basically. So by the time we finish this conversation, though, I bet we've deployed already, and I can go to a garbage URL, 404 ASDF, and I get my 404 page, which is great, because I now have a 404.html. So yeah, we can just take a real quick look and see how quickly that one deployed. Deployed in 10 seconds. Can't beat that. Okay. So another thing I'm going to want to do is, if I look at my source for this thing, and actually I don't even need to look here for the source. I'm just going to look in my my generated site. If I look at the source for these things, there's not even an HTML tag around this stuff. It's just the markdown that I wrote got turned into H1s, H2s, Ps, ULs, etc. That's not right. We want to add some actual proper HTML to the shell of our website. And to do this, we're going to use a feature called layouts. Layouts in Eleventy live in a folder at the root named includes. And we can add a file there. I'm going to call it base. And then we can use several templating languages that we want to. I'm going to use Nunjux, and the file extension for that is NJK. The reason I'm using that one is because that seems to be the one that the creator of Eleventy uses, because the docs are the best for Nunjux and all the examples are in Nunjux. If you're interested in a different templating language to build your layouts, if you go to the Eleventy documentation, this is probably my favorite thing about Eleventy is that they do have this primary logo that has the 11TY, but they also have an alternate logo that is a possum being carried by a red balloon. But here it lists out all the different template languages you can use. So there's a bunch of them: HTML, Markdown, Liquid, Nunjux, Handlebars, etc. Like I said, we're choosing Nunjux because that seems to be the one that has the most features in Eleventy. And what I'm going to do here for my base layout, I'm going to go ahead and just grab some code that I already wrote. Here's what my base layout looks like. Since I'm in Nunjucks, I'm writing markup again, writing HTML. Got a doc type, got an HTML tag. I'll throw in a head and a body. I've added a title, spooky kitties. My body tag, I've specified a style just so it's easier for us to see if it's paying attention to or it's using the template. And then I have this right here, which is just a token that says, okay, well, this is where the content for any page that uses this layout is going to go. It's going to go in that little block right there. I'm going to go ahead and save this. I've created my base template, but I need to actually use it. So in my, oops, wrong key. In my index.md, I'm going to go and I'm going to add some more front matter to this one. This time I'm going to specify in the metadata, I want you to use for the layout base.njk. Now we should be able to check our site, generated site with the index.html. It has HTML, head, title, all that stuff. If we go look at our site over here, refresh it, well, it looks like garbage. And it looks like it encoded all of our HTML, which is exactly what it did. If we look in here, we've got ampersand less than, ampersand greater than. This is a pretty simple thing to fix real quick. What we need to do in our layout is just tell Nunjucks that this is safe to render as is. Easy thing to miss, simple thing to fix. So once I do that, I'm going to go back here and you can see it's centered visually, so clearly it's pulling in that layout. We still have that giant image. We'll deal with that in a little bit. And if I view the source of this one, actually, again, let's go back to the site folder and view it there. Here we can see it's just all the HTML. I have my layout code at the top. Then I have the markdown stuff that I wrote in the middle, where that content placeholder was. Another thing that I want to add here is I would assume that we want a different title on every page. So we'll just stick a placeholder in. Oops, I'm in the index.html. I don't want to be there. I want to be in my layout, base.njk. I want to put in a title right there for each page that gets rendered. Save it and pull it back up. Trust me when I say that there is no title in the title bar because I didn't specify one. But I can go into my index.md and I can say, well, the title is home. And now back over here, it does now have home in the title. So we can do that. Let's do that in all the other pages too. We'll go ahead and we'll add a title to our about. Oops, we have to say title about. I'm gonna just kind of grab that. And then my 404. Sorry, not found. Something like that. And then my blog index, let's add some stuff there. Title, blog. Cool. So now when we just go back to our site and poke around, you'll have to trust me on this because it's going to be hard to read back there. But, well, that one didn't. Oh, yep, it didn't get picked up because I didn't specify that it should use the layout file. So I also need to say layout base.njk. And I'm going to add that to all the other ones too. My 404 needs it. My about needs it. And I think that should be good. Let's go ahead and check it out. And indeed here now I have, it's centered so I know it's using the layout and it's got blog in the title. So that's good. We can check out our about page. Looks like the same thing. And then our 404. 404 looks like it didn't pick it up. Maybe I didn't save it. Oh, because I went to the wrong URL. It still had it in, it had it with a slash. I I have to view 404.html. That's why. Okay. Cool. The other thing I think we should do is we should add a header to this thing. So let's just real quick, I'm going to go into my base layout, and before I insert the content, I'm going to stick a header in here, and it's just going to have some links. Not totally sure why that's going on, but whatever. It's just got links to home, about, and blog. We'll just look back over here. We've got the home, we've got the about, we've got the blog. That makes it a little easier for us to test things. And it's probably useful to users in the end to have navigation. Having done that, I think we're probably ready to commit some work here. So let's go ahead and add that, commit it, where are we, header, and then we'll push it. Now, one thing I'd really like to do differently here is on the blog page. I probably just want, for all my posts that I'm going to put here, I'm going to want to just specify that it's part of the blog section, so I'll just put a blog heading on it. But that means that I need to kind of nest my layouts. I need to create a blog layout that inherits from my base layout. So to do that, we're going to go back to our layouts. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some blog posts. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's do post1.md. And in there, we'll put my post 1. Kittens are the best, especially when they're spooky. Post2.md. Nope, wrong one. CMS. Post 2. Kittens are still cool, not sure about the spooky ones. You can kind of see that as we write these posts, we're getting less excited about spooky kitties. Post 3, kittens are okay, they're kind of spooking me out. Post 4. Kittens are mad, the spooky ones are the worst. And then we'll add one more. Post 5. No more spooky kittens. Alright, so we have a bunch of blog posts here. But we want all of our blog posts to inherit from a specific layout that is different from our base layout. To do that, I'm going to add in my includes folder a blog.njk. And here, what I'm going to do is CMS, what section is this? 5, that one. All I want to do is just put a blog heading at the top. And again, I'm using content with the safe filter to dump out the content of the page. I am now going to tell this thing to inherit from the base. And I do that by giving this layout another layout. So the blog layout has a layout of base.njk. I need to go tell these posts that they're using my blog layout. So we'll do layout blog.njk. And then I'm going to just put that in all of them. Okay, this one's going to be jacked up because it doesn't, it has spaces there. Okay, so I've got everything set up. Let's just make sure that I did everything correctly. I should be able to go back out to my blog locally, and I see spooky bloggy kitties. That's correct. I don't have any links there for any of my posts, but if I go to post 1, I'm failing. Oh, because I named it without a dash. That's fine. Let's get rid of the dash. There we go. Here's blog post 1. I'm using the base layout because it's centered, and I'm using the blog layout because it's got the blog heading on it, and then I've got my image of my kitten. And we should be able to verify it's the same on post 2. Looks good. 3, etc. Cool. This is a good place to commit some work. Posts. And then we'll push it out. The other thing about this site is that it looks like garbage right now. So let's do some styling. We want to add a CSS file. Maybe in real life you want to write your CSS with Sass or something like that, or post CSS. You could easily do that too. For this example, I'm just going to create a folder called CSS, and I'm going to add a site.css file to that. And now I'm going to dump out some CSS in here. Pretty simple stuff. It's Halloween, so the background color has to be black and the color has to be orange. I'm going to make the images smaller because those giant kittens are kind of freaking me out. And then I'm just going to make those unordered lists look a little nicer than they look right now. Real simple CSS that we're going to add. So I've created my CSS file. What I need to do is add it to my layout so that it actually gets included. So I'm going to go to my includes folder, to my base, and in my head elements, I'm going to go ahead and add, I believe we're in 8, 7, 6, 6. There it is. I'm just going to add a link to the style sheet. And when I save it, my site still doesn't look good because we forgot to copy the CSS through to the site folder. So again, this is the same problem that we ran into before. Eleventy isn't going to copy anything if it isn't Markdown, HTML, a templating language, or something that you told it to copy over. So we have to go copy that over. We're going to do that in our Eleventy.js real quick. Oops, that was too many. I'm just going to add another line that adds pass-through copy for CSS. Now when I go back to my site, look, it looks like Halloween, so that's great. So I've got my blog in orange text. I can bounce around this thing, and this looks a lot nicer now that it's nice and small. And I think at this point, we're probably ready to commit these changes. Feels like a good breaking point. We added CSS. We can actually go back out to our live website and make sure that that's been deploying. Let's check out the deploys here. Because Netlify is connected to our GitHub repository, every time we push out a change, it triggers a build for us. So we don't even need to go configure anything for CI. It just does it all for us, which is awesome. We can see the CSS one is building. That's great. I bet if we visit the site, it's either black and orange or pretty soon. Yep, it's already out there. So this is already live on our SpookyKittiesNetlify.com site. The last thing I want to do with content is I want to actually put these blog posts on this blog index page, because it's not useful to anybody if they have to know the URL to go find the blog post. So to do this, we're going to use a feature called collections. And we start with collections by basically adding a tag to everything that we want to fit inside of that collection. So in this case, I'm going to put on all my posts a tag called post. There, and there, and there. And what this is really doing is it's adding basically an identifier for all the content that I want to pick up to display on this blog index page. Now, we can't display the other pages, we can't loop through them, iterate through them with Markdown, but we can iterate through them with nunjucks. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to convert this index.md to a nunjucks template. Or if you wanted a different templating language, you could. So I've got index.njk. I'm going to actually just get rid of all this, and trust me when I say that this is the same thing. So I've got a layout. I'm using the base layout, and then now since I'm nunjucks, it looks like HTML. I've got an H1, and then I have a div, and then I have a UL, and here I'm using nunjucks to iterate through an array. In this case, that array is called posts, and it's on the collections object. This got here. The posts were added here when I added this post tag to each of them. So in my nunjucks template, I can iterate through all of those things that are marked as a post. And then on each one, I get the URL that the user is going to navigate to get to it. And then I also get a data object, which has all of the metadata that I defined on all of the files. So in this case, I added titles to all of them. Hopefully. I didn't. Let's go do that right now. Post 1. Post 2. You probably would come up with more creative names than this, but I'm not going to. 4 and 5. Okay, so when I go back to my local one, let's see where we're at. Spooky Kitties, we go to the blog page. We've got them iterating through right here. So we're rendering an unordered list with each of the posts that were marked with a post tag, which is great. In this case, they're in the wrong order. We usually want to put the most recent articles up near the top, and we've got the latest at the bottom. Post 5 is at the bottom. How that works, you might think that it's based on the name of the file. It isn't. Eleventy goes based on, I believe it is the updated timestamp of the file, and orders them in order of oldest to newest. But we can change that. We can add a date property to each of them. Oops, 2018. We'll just do that. We'll add a date property to each of them, and then I'm going to show you, once we do that, and I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is the second. This is the third. That's the fourth. And that's the fifth. When I refresh, it's still the same thing. But if I were to take that fifth one and knock it back a month, you can see now that post 5 is on the top. So what's cool is Eleventy just looks for a date property by default, out of the box. That's what it looks for. And if you put a date property on it, it will use that instead of any file system date to tell what is the most recent. And that's really useful because if you go back and you edit content, it's going to update the timestamp and then it's going to get out of sequence. Now the problem with this is it's still in the wrong order. Because it still goes from 1, 2, 3, it goes from 1 to 5, and I want it to go from 5 to 1. And the way that I'm going to do this is by creating a custom collection in Eleventy. To do that, I'm going to go into my Eleventy file again, my Eleventy configuration. Everything that's custom about what I'm doing right now, that Eleventy doesn't do out of the box, is inside of this Eleventy.js file. So these are the only things that I've customized so far. I'm also going to add a little snippet here to reverse the order of the posts. And what this thing does is it calls add collection on Eleventy config. I give the collection a name. I'm calling it posts reversed. And then a function where collection is basically all of the content in the site. And so then I can call this helper called get filtered by tag and pass it post, and it's only going to pick up all of the content that has that post tag on it. And then it's going to reverse it. So this should basically take our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and turn it into 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll save that. I named this collection post reversed. So in my blog index, I need to actually iterate through post reversed instead of post. And as soon as I save that, we'll see it's sorting from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which is the order that we want it to do. Cool. This is a great spot for us to commit our work because I think that's about all the content changes that I want to make right now. What I'd like to do is open it up for someone to come in through the CMS to go ahead and update those posts or write new posts. So let's add this work. We'll commit it What did we just do? We did reverse posts, and then we'll push it to the origin. Here's where we're going to pull up the Netlify CMS. So here's the Netlify CMS website. It's got lots of information on it. The most useful thing is this Get Started button. There are ways that you can start basically out of the box. Like if you want to use one of these other sites or static site generators, they have several of these things where you literally click that Deploy to Netlify button and it'll deploy a site for you that is configured for this stuff, which is really cool. But there's some stuff further down that walks you through how to hook up Netlify CMS, and that's what we're going to be doing right now. So the first thing that we are going to do is we have to add a page basically for the CMS to live on our website. And we're going to do this in an admin folder. We're going to add a file named index.html. It's not markdown, it's HTML. I just want it copied through as is. Because this is a pretty simple thing that's just going to have a little bit of HTML on it. It's got a doc type, it's got an HTML, it's got a head with a title of Content Manager. The body pulls in this script, unpackage.com, Netlify CMS. So this is basically just a page that serves up a script from Netlify. What it's going to become on the website is basically the CMS that somebody logs into and enters the content. Another thing we need to do before we can actually push this out is add another file called, I believe it's config.yml. Let me make sure. Yep. So config.yml is what Netlify is going to use to identify what type of content the user should be able to edit. So you're basically telling it, oh, I have blog pages that go here, and they have these fields on them. It's more complicated YAML than we've seen so far. We'll go through a line at a time. We specify a backend, in this case, get gateway and branch mkejs. What this basically means is this instance of the CMS, when it commits things, should commit through whatever we connect it to through Git and in the branch mkejs. We can specify a media folder, which is where it will put all of the files that somebody uploads. We can specify collections, and this is how the CMS will know what the user can edit to publish on your site. So here we're saying my collection is named blog, and it has a label that's used in the UI, and then it has a path to the folder where the documents are stored. Allow users to create new documents in this collection. The slug is how it creates the file name with a template. And then we specify the fields that are in each one of those blog posts. It has a layout, and we're going to tell it that it's the blog layout, but it's hidden, so the user can't actually go edit it. When the user creates the content, we want all of that content to have that layout set. We want to specify the tags as posts, but again, we want to hide it from the user. We just want this so that these posts end up in our iterating collection. And then the things that the user can actually touch are a title, a publish date, and a body. There are a bunch of different types of widgets that you can specify for Netlify CMS for different data types, basically. Cool. So we've done this. There's one more sneaky little thing that we need to do. We need to go to back to the index.html in the admin, and we're going to add one real quick line here in the head. 8. And this adds a link to, or it includes a script that is called the Netlify identity widget. This thing is basically going to let us connect Netlify to basically allow us to authenticate through Netlify for the CMS. And so I'm going to add it here, and I'm also going to add it in my my base layout. Cool. And so now that I've done that, I think I'm ready to commit this work and push it. Oh, one thing I forgot. Does anybody have an idea what it might be? I forgot to, oh, I'm surprised it actually copied that through. Did I do that already? Oh yeah, because it was HTML, I copied it directly through. You're right. Yep, I was thinking I would need to add the pass-through copy for the admin, but it looks like I don't need to.
Do you need to for your YAML
Oops.
file?
What's that?
Do you need to for your YAML file?
Oh yes, thank you. I do. Good catch. So we're going to tell it just copy through the entire admin folder. There it is. And so yes, so now we have the config YAML and we have the index.html. Thank you for catching that. All right, so let's go ahead and let's go back out to Netlify. I'm on my Spooky Kitties website, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, oh, I think I forgot to commit my work. Let's add it. We'll commit it. Netlify CMS, whatever, spelled it wrong. And then we'll push it to the origin. And now, we should be able to go back over here. And we are going to configure our site. Well, oops, not display settings. We're going to go to our identity. And we are going to enable identity. Now what this is basically this is Netlify wants to, we're telling Netlify that it can take care of handling authentication for us. So we're going to enable identity, and then we're going to check the settings for identity. And on the registration preferences, we're going to say open or invite only. I'm going to choose open. Additional providers, I'm going to add Google using the default configuration. And then, is there anything else that I want to check here? Oh, I want to invite a user. So somewhere I can do that. Emails. You can customize all the emails that you're sending for new users and things like that. I seem to have lost the place to send an invite.
If you have it open and you're not allowed to add invites.
Oh. Here.
Right there.
Here we go. I can invite users from here. So I'm going to send it to my Gmail. Send that. We'll wait for that to come through. The other thing I also want to do on my identity settings in the custom settings is to enable the Git gateway. And this is what allows the CMS to push out to my repository. I didn't have to do much of anything there. It basically just grabbed an auth token, but I did have to do that. Okay, so I should be able to check my email. You've been invited. I'm not letting you see most of my email, I'm sorry. There's important things in there. But let's see if we can zoom in so you can read that. You've been invited to create a user at Spooky Kitties, accept the invite. So I am going to go ahead and I'm going to accept that invite. I clicked the button and I should be able to, I wonder if it didn't deploy yet. Might not have deployed, or I missed something in the deployment, one of the two. Let's check our deploy log. Everything has been pushed. Let's try going directly to the admin. Config should have required a property backend. Oh, I think I forgot to save my config YAML file. Is what that looks like to me. Yep, I forgot to save my config YAML. So it basically had an empty configuration. So it just flat out wasn't working. So let's just add. Same message, I don't care. And let's push. Okay, so that's happening. We'll wait for that build to finish and then we should be able to log in and then edit some content real quick. Take a look at our deploys. It's building, but by the time I click in to actually look at it, it's already done. I'm serious. Go, if you can use Netlify for everything possible, do it, because it's amazingly fast. Okay, so we're at a point where I should be able to grab that URL again, or that invite token. That didn't seem to work. Let me try hitting the admin directly again, see if I missed that. Let's see if we can actually get to that YAML file, because it looks like we can't. Downloaded it, and it's got nothing in it. I may have forgotten to commit it again. Oh, you know why? No, I don't know why. I don't know why. I bet it's optimizing based on the fact that it's the same commit message. That's my guess. So let's just do this. Okay. In the meantime, while we wait for that, well, let's give it about 20 seconds. Site is live. Let's go ahead and check this token again, accept the invite. That's not what I expected to see, so I suspect that it didn't work either. Let's.
Did you save the configuration you made to include the YAML file?
To include the YAML file?
Yeah.
Oh, the pass-through?
Yeah.
Let's check. Yep. Yeah, the config YAML file was serving up. It was just empty. Okay, I'm just going to try one real quick thing, and if that doesn't work, I'm going to show you. Here we go. I'm going to just pull up a different. Yep. Okay, I'm not sure what's wrong with this right now, but here, let's pull up my wife's website, and then you can see what the CMS looks like, real quick. So this is my wife's website. She teaches yoga. If you like yoga, you should take a class from her in Milwaukee. So I go to the admin, and I get this Netlify CMS. I can log in with Netlify identity. I'm going to do that. I'm going to just continue with Google. That's going to log in with my Gmail address. Here's the CMS that comes up. I can create new blog articles for her. I've got several different fields that she can enter. She can enter a title, whatever, a publish date, tags, which I'm not currently using but will be, and then the body text. It's a pretty simple GUI, and it does actually translate directly to Markdown. You can actually check a box here. It'll show you what the Markdown looks like. I've told her to never do that. Just don't touch that, because it's just going to confuse you. But for the most part, you can do the basic things that you want to do when you edit content. And then when you're ready, you can go ahead and publish it. I am not going to push this publish button. It does what you would think it would do. It publishes. But the way that it publishes is it actually takes this new Markdown file, puts it in the blog folder, names it 2018-10-30.md, puts it in the blog folder, commits that, and then pushes that out to GitHub. And then Netlify, because Netlify is hosting, is just watching for changes in the repository. And when it sees that something changed, it goes and it kicks off another build, and we get our website deployed again. So that's kind of how it all works. Does anyone have any questions about any of it? Yes?
When the user makes a change, like through that admin panel right there, or whatever, the last screen, that one, it counts as a commit towards.
Yes. Yep. So if I look at I'm just gonna real quick pull up the source code for another branch that I think will demonstrate. Let's do code commits. Why can I never find the commits?
It's on the bar.
Oh, there it is. Thank you. Because there's only 5 different levels of navigation. So you can see it here. Here's an example where I was just kind of working through the demo. But yeah, create blog. It's a commit in the history. Create blog. This should work. Create blog. Whoa, what is this business? So yes, every time it creates one, which is cool because then you can see the history of everything. Yes.
Just to follow up on that, do you tell it what to title that commit, or is it just like general?
You can, so if you remember, I kind of glossed over this pretty quickly, but if you look in that config YAML,
Yeah.
the commit itself, the commit itself, I don't know if you have control over that.
Sure. So like yours that said like, you know, the date and then meow or whatever, is that just like?
And that was the title of I think that was the title that I was adding, the title of the page.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yep.
That's super convenient.
Yeah, yes, so, and that's because of this actually. It is because of the slug that I have in the config YAML.
Okay.
It's got slug at the end, so that's what ended up in the URL.
Nice.
Cool. Anything else? Awesome. Thank you for hanging out with me.